Thank you so much. For the final part of our program, I am privileged to introduce our speaker for tonight, Shabbos Kestenbaum. Shabbos is an advocate for Jewish teens and university students in predominantly non-Jewish spaces, dedicated to ensuring they feel safe and heard. His work really reflects the core mission of JSU and exemplifies the values I seek to embody as a Jewish leader. Shabbos is a political advocate who completed his master's at the Harvard School of Divinity. He is currently suing Harvard for its anti-Semitic policies and lack of response to anti-Semitism on campus, and he recently spoke at the Republican National Convention. Shabbos is also an MCSY advisor. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Shabbos Kestenbaum.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to just talk about it. Well, thank you so much for that not well-deserved introduction, but nevertheless appreciated. There are not many communities that I would agree to speak at 6 times in one day. But then again, there are not many communities like the Jewish community here in Toronto. And I have felt your love, your warmth, and your support. And I actually, this is true, I was meant to be with the former president last night to commemorate October 7th in Miami, but I felt that it was more important for me to be here in Toronto on time. And I really can't say and I really can't say thank you enough for having me. I want to start by saying something that usually I don't, but I think it's really important because I'm so inspired by the young people in the room. You're not the future leaders, you're not tomorrow's leaders, you are the leaders right now who are battling in the battlegrounds of ideas, the battlegrounds of values, and the battlegrounds for our people. And the story goes, when I was living in the old city of Jerusalem, I lived 2 minutes away from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Never a dull moment. And we got the news that Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman passed away. Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman was the leader of ultra-Orthodox Jewry in the state of Israel. He died at the age of 103. He died weighing roughly 75 pounds. There's a disagreement as to what his diet consisted of. Some said it was a boiled carrot. Others said it was leaky potato water. Point being, this was not a man of many materialistic means. In fact, and this is true, you can go on YouTube and watch this. Towards the end of his life, his medical team have a press conference outside of the hospital to update everyone. And his chief surgeon is not a religious man. He's not wearing a kippah. He's not observant. And he says, as a matter of fact, that we have tried and administer medical interventions to Aaron Leib Steinman, but his body simply does not respond. It's as if he's not of this earth. If any of you have ever been to Bnei Brak, the city right next to Tel Aviv in Israel, you'll know that their lifestyle is very different from the lifestyle that many of us choose to pursue. It is not a lifestyle where you will find many swimming pools, many mansions, or many nice cars. And there was a successful businessman living in Bnei Brak, and he felt that it'd be inappropriate given his stature to show up to his business meetings, to show up before he signs multi-million-dollar contracts, to show up in his beaten station wagon. And he thinks it'd be appropriate if he buys a sports car. His wife is concerned that buying such a car would elicit jealousy and anger in that community, so they decide, why don't we go to Rav Aaron Leib Steinman and ask him what he thinks. So the successful businessman knocks on Rav Aaron Leib Steinman's door. His house was no bigger than this bima. You could Google the images of his house. He had the same oven that was given to him by the British Mandate of Palestine in 1947. He had that all the way to his death in 2017. In fact, I went to his funeral. I went along with 700,000 other people. Kvish Echad, the main highway connecting Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, was entirely shut down, and we walked on the highway to get there. So this man knocks on the door. He presents his dilemma. He says, Rabbi, should I buy the sports car, yes or no? Rav Aaron Leib Steinman looks at him and says, have you ever finished the Talmud? What? Have you ever finished the Talmud? He says, Rabbi, if I learned just a page a day, it would take me 7.5 years to finish the Talmud. Rav Steinman says, I understand, but you said you're a businessman. Have you ever learned the Jewish laws pertaining to business and how to deal ethically. And, well, I've heard a lecture here or two, but no, I've never learned it seriously. And Rav Steinman says, fine, I understand. Have you ever completed a tractate of the Talmud? And the businessman is getting a little bit more embarrassed, and he says, well, no, not really. And Rav Aron Leib Steinman says, fine, I have one last question. Have you ever learned a page of Torah in your life? And looking down, rubbing his neck embarrassingly, with a tear in his eye, he looks at Rav Steinman and he says, no. And so Rabbi Steinman says, fine, so go buy your sports car. Because who would ever be jealous of someone who's never learned a page of Torah in his life? I cannot tell you how inspired, how moved I am when I see young people, not the Jewish nonprofits, not the elected leadership, but young Jewish people who have woken up after October 7th and have adamantly refused to go back to sleep, who have said that these are my values, and I'm going to fight for them no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how scary, and no matter how challenging. And yes, it's a pretty exhausting day. I'm in a perpetual state of jet lag. But I promise you, there's nowhere else I would rather be than with the special, unique community that is Toronto. When I'm not suing Harvard, which takes up a lot of my time, I actually study the Holocaust. That's, not very optimistic. That's my academic specialty. And throughout my studies, I came across a fascinating figure by the name of Abraham Johann Must. Abraham Johann Must was not Jewish. He was actually a Catholic priest. Nobody's perfect. And he decides, before the anti-war movement against the war in Vietnam became a movement, that he was going to protest outside of the White House. And as he's protesting, a reporter comes up to him and says, Father, I don't really get it. Nixon has gone to sleep. It's 2 a.m. There's no one here. There's no one protesting with you. There's no media that's going to cover this. Why are you doing this? You're not going to change the world. And Father Must, without missing a beat, looks at the reporter and says, I don't think you understand. I'm not doing this to change the country. I'm doing this so the country doesn't change me. So the country doesn't change me. There are moments in life that you never forget. And one of them was October 7th, is October 7th, I should say. I was at Harvard Chabad, the main institution of Jewish life on campus, on the joyous holiday of Simchas Torah, and rumors began to circulate. There was a bombing, no, it was a stabbing, no, it was a shooting. As the night progressed, the rumors were strengthened and the rumors persisted, and it became very clear that what was happening in the state of Israel, in our ancestral homeland, was something that we as young people had never experienced before in our lives, and that is Israel as an existential issue. Israel where its legitimacy, where its existence, where its survival is very much in question. And although I'm a religious Jew and I've never used my phone or electronics on Shabbat or the holidays, for the first time in my life, I go to my dorm and I take out my phone and I begin calling my loved ones in Israel. I have 4 siblings, including one who's right now in Lebanon. I have grandparents, I have aunts, I have uncles, I have cousins. While it took me hours and hours, thank God they were okay, but that is certainly not the case of all Jewish students at Harvard, and it's certainly not the case of the hundreds of thousands of Jewish students across North America. I was recently on a panel with Martin Luther King's niece, and she reminded me of an excellent line by her uncle. We will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. At Harvard University, at institutions of higher learning across the United States, across Canada, we would have been lucky to have simply had the silence of our friends. But the reaction of the most intelligent, of the most elite, of the most sensitive in our society when they saw the images of women bleeding from their private areas, when they saw the images of Jewish babies crying as they're being hoarded onto motorcycles taken into Gaza, as they saw the images of burnt bodies in cars, 34 student groups at Harvard University representing more than 1,000 students drafted what they called an emergency statement to blame Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. The statement said, "We hold the Israeli apartheid regime entirely responsible for all ongoing violence in the Middle East." My friends, there is something seriously sick in our society. There is something that is so morally rotten at the very core of our countries when the best and brightest can look at a massacre, can look at the rape of Jewish women, and side with those who committed those acts. And while it is true, as Charles Dickens says, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. You do not need me to tell you that anti-Semitism in the United States, in Canada, and across this world has never been seen in such naked, unvarnished ways since the Holocaust. And I can tell you, Rav Yosef Breuer, my great-great-grandfather, he was arrested by the Gestapo on the night of Kristallnacht. And as the Nazis were dragging him out, he called to his daughter, my great-aunt, to say a chapter of Psalms for me. And my great-aunt, who's alive and well, 94 in Washington Heights, New York, she will be the first one to tell you that Kristallnacht, that the Holocaust, it did not begin with book burnings, it did not begin with Auschwitz, it did not begin with broken glass, it did not begin with mass deportations. It began with one thing and one thing only, and that was the acceptance, the normalization, and the celebration of anti-Semitism. And I can tell you, without any hesitation, without any reservation, that the treatment of Jewish students on their respective college campuses across this continent is eerily similar to that acceptance, to that normalization, and to that celebration. I have been incredibly privileged the last few months to meet some important people, give some big speeches, go to some cool places. But there's really only one speech that I actually cared about, besides this. 2 speeches. Actually, I'll be back here in January, so 3 speeches. Let's save it. And that was at the Republican National Convention, not because of the speech itself, but because of what happened that morning. That morning, the car takes me from the hotel into the convention arena to do what was called a walkthrough. And the stage manager is a man by the name of Eric. And he tells me, "Mr. Kestenbaum, this is the podium you'll be addressing the audience. This is the stage you'll be on. This is what your hair and makeup will look like," which was a little weird. And he says, "Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions?" And I really did not. As you can tell, I did not care how I looked. I did not care about the teleprompter, because the speech I gave was actually very different than the teleprompter. And after about 2 hours, I decided we were done with the walkthrough and I was going to go back to the hotel. As I open the car door, I turn around and I say, "Eric, you know what? I actually have one question. Can you promise me in a few hours when I give this speech, in front of millions of Americans watching at home, in front of the former President of the United States, can you promise me when I give that speech that the camera that is going to televise it live will be able to see that I'm wearing a kippah?" Only question I have. Because I have 2 friends right now at Harvard University, and I have a running list of hundreds of students that I've been able to meet in the US and in Canada, who have told me about the kippahs that they've stopped wearing, who have told me about the Star of David that they've tucked in, who have told me about them ceasing their involvement with Jewish life on campus. And I thought, irrespective of the words I'm saying, regardless of the substance of my speech, the most important thing was that those 2 friends, and that for the millions of Americans watching, that they see in the 21st century Jews can and should and must be wearing their Jewish pride as loudly, as publicly, and as confidently than ever before. In fact, that night, right before my speech, a woman comes to get me and says, "Mr. Kestenbaum, your speech is next. Follow me." And we go down a very long corridor, and we're flanked by the Secret Service on both sides. And we enter a very, very small room backstage. And the room is 4 people. It's me, it's Lee Zeldin, a politician in New York, and it's Omer Nutra's parents. Omer Nutra, of course, is the American Jewish civilian still being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza in the terror tunnels. And I walk over to Omer Nutra's parents, Ronen and Orna, and I tell them there's actually nothing I can say, and there is certainly nothing I can do. I just want to add that the inspiration and the courage and the bravery that you have given me on an individual level is something I will never be able to repay for the rest of my life. And with that, I walk out, I begin to cry a little, and I say my speech. And as I said, of all of the speeches, and of all of the people, and of all of the events, none of them hold a candle to the 2-minute conversation I had with Omer Nutra's parents. None of them. To be a little selfish just for a moment and speak about me as an American, I think what made the murder of Hersh Goldberg Poland so difficult was because Hersh was not a hostage. Hersh was not a captive. Hersh was not a victim in a war. But Hersh was us. Hersh was you, and Hersh was me. Hersh was our brother. Hersh was our neighbor. Hersh was our cousin. Hersh was our friend. And I think when Hersh died, a little bit of us died as well. And it is inconceivable. It is horrifying that we are more than a year out, and Omer is not able to see his face plastered all over Harvard's campus. He's not able to see the rallies that the Toronto Jewish community have had for him and the other hostages. And I've met with Canadian Jewish students these last couple of months. I've been to Concordia and McGill and McMaster's and UFT, and Jewish Canadian students have shown me the pepper spray bottles that they now carry. They have shown me the classrooms where they were physically assaulted in. They have shown me the text messages of death threats that they've received from their peers. And it is unthinkable that in this country, that on this continent, that Jewish students would be treated with the disdain, the disregard, and the contempt that they are currently treated by their administrators, by their universities, and yes, by their governments. And I want to end by just saying one last thing. I was giving a talk in Miami about a month ago. And as I'm speaking, a woman raises her hand and says, "I want to add something." And she starts to stand up, and I see she's struggling. She's old, she's frail. And a young man, who I later found out was her son, helps her stand up. And she has a walker. And she says, "My name is Regina. I am 102 years old. I am a survivor of the Majdanek concentration camp. I am a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And I'm a survivor of Bergen-Belsen. And I just want to add, we will get through this because we have gotten through it before." And she sits back down. I'm here to tell you that we will get through this because we've gotten through it before. Because we are part of the greatest story ever told in human history. That is the story of the Jewish people. Because we are standing on the shoulders of giants, on people like Regina, on people like Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah. And whether you realize it or not, whether you like it or not, you're stuck with that story. And each and every one of you will be the authors of the next chapter in that Jewish story. And I urge you, I implore you, I beg you, to choose to be that author. Do not let our story and our narrative be dictated by our ideological adversaries. My brother, who I mentioned, is in Lebanon. He actually just had a kid. And the Brit Milah, the circumcision, was yesterday, on October 7th. And this morning he reported to Lebanon. And I asked him, how do you feel? And he said, I have never felt more prouder that for the first time in 3,000 years, I have a people to defend, I have a state to protect, I have values to fight for. I cannot affect the war in Gaza. Trust me, the IDF doesn't want me. And not even to peel the potatoes. I'll get half a Golani with salmonella. What I can do is fight in the battleground of ideas. I can fight in the battleground for truth and in the battlefronts of morality. And that's my time. And that is a fight that I ask each and every one of you, whatever your capacity is, whatever your talents are, to join me, to join the young Jewish students in that fight. Because we will fight them in the court of law, we will fight them in the court of public opinion, we will fight them in business, we will fight them in academia, we will fight them in the classroom, we will fight them in media, we will fight them on social media. We will not stop, we will not go quietly into the night. Why? Because we are the Jewish people. Because we have nothing to be embarrassed about, we have no one to apologize to, and nothing to apologize for. We will get through this because we have gone through it before. Am Yisrael.
We have time for 2 or 3 questions. So if you just want to take a seat and raise your hand. And if you have a question for Shabbos, I'll try to call on you. And when we have time, we'll start with Jamie over here.
Hi, I just want to start off by thanking you so much for coming. As a recent college grad, I'm saying college, you're from the States, there are only a few of us here that have really been through university. And most of this room have not been to university yet and are planning on going very, very soon. What is your one piece of advice for going into first year as a proud Jewish student in times like this?
So it's a great question, and thank you for fighting for us and with us. Before I was here, I spoke with a group of grade 12, how do you say it in Canada? Grade 12ers? 12th graders? People who are about to finish high school. And they're not sure what they're going to do next year, whether go to college or whether go to a gap year in Israel. And I said, forget about religion, forget about Judaism, just for a second. I said, if you look at the past year, if you look at college campuses across this continent, and your immediate reaction is, I want to put myself in that environment without first being a proud, educated Jewish person, I think you are doing yourself a tremendous disservice. We're not here to combat anti-Semitism. We are here to be proud Jews, to bring godliness into this world. That involves combating anti-Semitism, but that is not our main priority. So I encourage young people especially to find that teacher, find that role model, find that community member. Challenge and ask and critique and debate, but be a proud and educated Jewish person. There's a very dirty open secret at Harvard, which is the encampments, where people lived in tents for 4 weeks, where they followed Jews like me on their way to class, where they called for an intifada, where they praised Hamas terrorists. They were very often led by Jewish students. Very often. And these Jewish students, I can tell you because I know them, because I was in class with them. These are Jewish students who could not point to Israel on a map, who cannot speak Hebrew. If you ask them what Torah portion it is this week, they would not know what you're referring to. These are people who never once received a Jewish education. And it is so sad, it is so painful to walk by these Jewish students and know how our community so failed them. Because if only they had a Jewish education, if only they grew up in a community like this, if only they were ingrained at a young age with our values, with a synagogue, with a Jewish day school, how different could their lives have ended up? So the number one answer is to be educated. And the number 2 answer is once you have decided you are going to go into the lion's den, that you are going to fight. Number 1, it's very admirable, and thank you. Number 2, as I said, you have nothing to be intimidated or nervous about. I am so proud of the fact, I was just asked this about an hour ago, I'm so proud of the fact that Israel is a progressive democracy that elevates everyone regardless of gender, of sexual orientation, of religious beliefs, that has the lowest combatant to civilian ratio of any war in modern history, that has Jews and Muslims and Christians and Buddhists and Hindus fighting side by side for the only democracy in the Middle East. I mean, what a powerful story to tell. What a powerful, important, beautiful story to tell. So just remember, when you fight on that campus, you're not alone. You have an army of supporters, including myself, and we want to be there with you in any and every way we can.
Hey, William.
Hi,
Introduce yourself first.
my name's William. I'm a grade 12 at a private school here, Upper Canada College, and you were one of my role models yesterday. You met with a bunch of people in New York. I saw on your Instagram.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name, so.
Well, okay. Who are your role models?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I mean, I hope you find better role models, but I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to answer in a very Jewish way by not answering it. Well, I will. Just give me 30 seconds first. At Harvard, it was particularly difficult because I did not really have a community supporting me. I lost all of my non-Jewish friends. In fact, my Jewish college roommate texted me 2 days ago saying that he doesn't want to speak to me anymore and we can't be friends anymore. He actually blocked my number on WhatsApp. It was a very, very difficult year because I felt like I was doing it alone, and I wish I would have had, someone stand up in a shul and say, I'm here for you guys and we're in this together. But I didn't, and that was really, really hard. And, a person, in a young man's life, you never forget your first death threat. It's a very special moment. But after like 50, it gets a little much. And it's difficult. I've lost most of my friends. As I said, I get death threats every day. I'm constantly heckled and criticized. So it was very, very hard for me. It is very hard for me because in my life, I wouldn't say, it's not that I don't have role models, but I didn't have that many people who were giving me guidance and advice. And each and every one of you, when I was speaking to the young people, you guys who are on the front lines, it's super, super important. That's why Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of Our Fathers, says, a selech harav, make for yourself a rabbi, a teacher, an educator. Have someone who's helping you out. And then I'll give you the cliche, boring answer, but it's actually really true, is I've always been very, very, I'm a big mama's boy. I've been very close with my mom, and everything I do, I always try to do it to make her proud. And unfortunately, she hates Trump, so she's not so proud at the moment. We don't talk about it. But she is someone who embodies everything about, the Ashes Chayil, the woman of valor. She had 7 kids, and she raised them to be proud Americans, to be proud Jews. She would play Naomi Shemer in the car every morning and cry on the way to work. And that really, embodied a passion for Zionism, for the people of Israel, and for Jewish values. So I'll have to give a cop-out and say my mom.
We'll take one more. We have. Thank you, Shabbos.